In the last lecture, we enabled CSS module by ejecting the configuration, fine-tuning it, and then importing classes from the CSS files and using them. Now let's also add pseudo selectors and media queries. Pseudo selectors are important here in the app.js file, where we assign a button style. Now we'll no longer do this inline, so I'll remove the style property on the button here. And I will no longer set the style background color to red here, and no longer set the style up like this. We could do this, but now I want to do it the CSS module style. So there, we could now create a button CSS class, which we then assign to the button, or we simply create a normal CSS rule. For every button nested inside our app class, we can now assign the styles we want. Now this should be the styles we had before. I deleted them, so I will simply try to rebuild it. We had a blue border, I guess. Let's add some padding, maybe 16 pixels. Let's add a background color of green by default maybe. And let's set the font into inherit. And now if we save this already, we should get this button style here, because we still apply our styles here, no longer inline though. Make sure to also save app.js to really see the changes. We should get this style now. No longer inline, but the button here is styled because it's nested below our app selector here. And app is this special selector applied to the outer div. Now let me simply tweak the color. And of course we still want to be able to set the button to red, and we want to be able to see us hovering over it. So let me add button hover, normal CSS code here, nothing fancy, and set the background color here to light green and the color to black maybe. And now let's add the red case. Now for that, I'll simply add app button red. So normal CSS rule to style any button which has the red class. Set the background color here to red. And now also add app button red hover to set the background color to salmon and the color to black for hovered buttons with the red class. Now all we need to do is conditionally add the red class to this button if we need it. So back in app.js, we simply need to bind the class name of the button. So we will do this in the render function, of course. Prior to the if statement, we have a default button class, which is null, let's say, or simply an empty string. Then inside this if statement, where I assign persons, I set button class equal to classes red. Let's see if that works. If I now go down to the button and add class name and set this equal to button class. Now, one important note, button class always needs to be a string if we assign it to class name. And classes red in the end is just a string created by the CSS loader, which gives us still access to the class like this, but in the end returns a string with the valid CSS. Or it is an empty string if we're outside of this if condition. Now let's save this. Let's reload the app. Hovering over it works. Oh, we should add that cursor pointer thing. And clicking on it also works with that red class, which you can see is added now. So this also works for nested classes, as you can see. Red is a class we define only on buttons. And still, in our JavaScript component, we import it on that overall classes object. So any CSS class we define in the CSS file we import with that CSS modules enabled, any classes defined in here, even if they only apply to a special subselector, are available on the classes object we're importing from that CSS file. Now let me conclude this button thing here by now again adding a cursor, which is a pointer. With that, save all the files, and now we get this nice pointer here everything working as it should. Let's next have a look at media queries.